All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick, are breaking down the long-awaited Big Ten showdown between Penn State and Ohio State. Buckeyes, 4.5-point favorites. 48.5 is the total. 12 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. Kicking your Saturday off right in Columbus. Looking at this Penn State offense, it's been a very interesting unit for the Nittany Lions. Drew Eiler, former five-star recruit, getting the keys to the offense this season. 65% comp rate, 1,254 yards passing and 12 touchdowns. Also has 3 on the ground. No picks for him. He's been pretty flawless, the young quarterback. This is going to be a big-time opportunity for him, though, going on the road. His first 2 road starts at Illinois, at Northwestern. Those games weren't exactly that pretty, Nick. Now he has to walk into Columbus. Big-time matchup here with playoff implications on the line for an offense that is 119th in 20-plus yard passing plays. Only one 40-plus yard passing play, which is 124th nationally. In Ohio State, their defense has only allowed 0 passing plays of 40-plus yards. Everything is aligning for this to be a very tough afternoon for Drew Eiler. How do you make of this assessment here of the young quarterback?
Drew Eiler has looked good so far. It looked as advertised so far this season, 1,254 yards and 12 passing touchdowns so far for him. The Nittany Lions are averaging 223.3 points per game so far this season, which is a pretty solid number if you're a Penn State fan. You really thought that they would rely on the running game this year. They have a really solid running back room with Keyshawn Allen and others who are involved with carrying the rock for this Penn State team. But Eiler's looked good passing. He's got some good targets so far this season. He finds himself in a good position. I think he's a good, physically strong, nice quarterback that slots into the system pretty well. Keandre Lambert-Smith's been his number 1 target so far with 402 yards receiving and 3 scores. Overall, I think this is a solid Penn State offense that can put points on the board. They've been pretty good the past couple of weeks, 63 against UMass this past Saturday, 41 against Northwestern after being sluggish out the gate, 31, 30, and 30 against Iowa, Illinois, respectively, and then 63 against Delaware. So this team can certainly put up points. They have no issue doing that, but they're facing a very good Buckeyes defense that has not given up a lot of points at all so far this season. They're really buckling down and going to a good form there in Columbus.
Yeah, again, I just think the 2 road starts already against Northwestern and Illinois. Those were his 2 worst games, I'd say. 219 yards passing for this football team in both of those contests. They really struggled to get things going for the most part in both of those. They were, 10-10 against Northwestern, against Illinois. Took them a while to crack that one. 46% comp rate in that game. And this is, a receiving core that certainly hasn't been as explosive as expected. Dante Cephas has not did anything. Only 7 receptions for him. Tyler Warren at tight end and Theo Johnson. These 2, they have exactly 16 receptions, which is tied for second on the team. Behind Keandre Lambert-Smith, 31 grabs, 402 yards, 3 scores. He's probably their most explosive pass catcher at this moment in time, but they're not really showcasing much speed. Harrison Wallace as well, I thought he would showcase some. And they've did a good job of spreading out the ball, I guess you could say. 5 different guys have double-figure receptions. But again, they've not been explosive one bit, Nick, and they're going to have to here, especially if they struggle to run the ball, which is probably going to happen against Ohio State. And if they can't run the ball, well, they're still going to have that complementary passing attack to win a game like this.
The explosiveness has not been there for this offense, and it's certainly a problem. Tyler Warren leads the team in touchdown receptions with 5 scores, but his average yards per catch is not great. In general, the average yards per catch for this team is not great, with Keandre Lambert-Smith having 13 yards per catch so far this season. They really struggle downfield, like you highlighted with the weak stats at the start of this segment about the offense. They got to be able to keep the balance on the ground. If they have struggles on the ground, which I think is certainly possible against a very good front 7 for Ohio State, they're going to be in trouble because they're going to find themselves behind the sticks and really having no opportunity to create something for this offense. Singleton, Allen are going to have really good days on the ground if they're going to be competitive in this game.
Yeah, this is one of the best backfields in the country. Sophomore sensations both have identical numbers. For Allen, 375, 3 scores, 362, 6 scores for Singleton. These guys both get, well over double-figure carries per contest, right there at the 60-yard per game mark, 200-plus as a team. And, this is going to be an opportunity for them to really shine their talents because they're going to have to be good. It's going to be more than just the offensive line. They're going to have to be good. 164 against Illinois, 134 against Northwestern. Though these are concerning numbers. They only had 215 against Iowa, where they ran the ball 57 times. These 2 road games, Nick, they're really, impressing me here for what the opponent was able to do to them. And it's not really impressive here for Penn State, I would say, because Illinois, their defense leading into that, had been pretty poor. And that is a very good D-line at the end of the day. And that really just wreaked havoc against Penn State. Northwestern, they're not good at all, and they're seemingly able to control them for most part of that contest, end up getting a backdoor cover, thankfully. 3rd road game here, though, Nick. If these trends continue, it's going to be a long day.
Certainly going to be an issue if these trends continue. 200 yards per game on the ground is impressive, considering that's a number a lot higher than Ohio State's producing on the ground. And, Allen and Singleton have the opportunity to kill games on the ground, like you said. Some issues on the road early against Northwestern. This is obviously a tougher environment than at Northwestern. It's going to be very loud in Columbus on Saturday. That crowd's going to be crazy going after them all game. If they're not in a rhythm early on and find themselves out of sync, it's going to be tough to play catch-up ball with a very, very talented Ohio State offense that McCord has the keys to and really seems to feel comfortable in now.
Yeah, this offensive line, if you want to have success, just follow Olu Fashanu. He's been an elite pass blocker, one of the nation's best this season. Certainly continues to progress as a run blocker as well. I'm worried about guys like Sal Wormley, Hunter Norzad on the interior. I want to see what these guys are made of. This is a big point of emphasis for me coming into the season is this interior offensive line. Really, the rest of the unit outside of that bookend left tackle would be a concern. And in those games right there, it's kind of showed. But you're going to have an opportunity here against a great great defensive line. This O-line can really earn their stripes here in this contest, and I think they'll have an admirable game. But will they be able to push the pile to 200-plus rushing and a big day through the air remains to be seen.
This is a huge opportunity for this offensive line. Like you said, Fashanu is really the only known quantity when we were talking about the preseason. Obviously, he, a consensus top 10 pick in the NFL draft coming up. Probably the best offensive lineman on the board currently, in my opinion. A guy I think it's going to go probably, top 5, top 7 range. But outside of that, like you said, a weak offensive line that has some concerns for Penn State. And now they're battling against a very talented front seven that is a big physical unit out there in Columbus that's been able to get after the quarterback and get after the running back in some of their games so far this season. I look at that right side, especially Sal Wormley, Caden Wallace at right tackle. I'm concerned about them. Hunter Norzad as well at center, worried about his performance. They got to stand up here and create these running lanes. This offense is going to have to run the ball efficiently if they want to be competitive with Ohio State.
Looking at that Ohio State offense, since I criticized the PSU offensive line, I'll go ahead and just start there with the Buckeyes. This unit has not been great, and we certainly didn't think it would be. Matthew Jones has been phenomenal at right guard. Josh Fryler at right tackle. These two have been standouts, but the rest of the unit, Donovan Jackson has regressed. Josh Simmons, didn't think he'd be a starter this year. Certainly had his issues. And Carson Hinsman at center has probably been their worst lineman. Short yardage has been a big area of concern for Ohio State. Pass protection, I think, has actually been pretty sound for the most part this season. But at any point, that could change, especially against a defensive line like this one. Short yardage, though, they have to be better, or at least more creative, Nick, because I think they're going to live in second and third and short. They're going to be in many third and fours or less in this game. And if they can't run the ball, it's just going to be a disaster. They got to be able to prove that they're CFP worthy here. This offensive line, I don't expect it to be an elite unit at any point this year, but they can certainly be admirable against tough opponents, and that's an opportunity here, just like Penn State.
This is certainly an opportunity for this unit that has looked good at times, but also has some issues going for them. But they need to be able to figure out what they can do at this point to get the job done. There's certain pieces on this offensive line that I am proud with. Some guys, Matthew Jones is a guy that I said had a big opportunity to make a name for himself this year. I highlighted him in the preseason. I believe that he was my Outland Trophy award winner. He's having a great season at right guard. He's been really good in the interior. He's kind of been the one big piece so far for this offensive line, but outside of him, the offensive line has shown some issues at times. They've not been really efficient running the ball at all so far this season. 135 per game on the ground is a number that's not great. I know that they're known for their passing attack in Columbus, but you want to see that number higher if you're a Big Ten team that can be physical. They've dealt with some injuries. I certainly will give you that. But overall, I want to see more out of them. Travion Henderson has not really quite lived up to the expectations so far this season. They need to find good balance on the ground. This offensive line needs to have a good day against a very dominant front seven from Penn State.
6 games last year of 200-plus rushing, only 1 so far this year. That was 2 of 4 against Western Kentucky. And this offense the last 2 weeks has really found a bit of a pulse and more consistency in the passing game. Only 17 points against Notre Dame, but even there they showcased some nice improvements. McCord, that was his first tough road start. Same goes for youngster Aller as he comes into this one, so a very similar situation. McCord was phenomenal, though, on third down and against pressure against Notre Dame. There was some takeaways there. He led them to that game-winning drive. Almost had an interception. Should have ended the deal for Notre Dame. Got away with one there. 320, 276, and 5 touchdowns combined the last 2 weeks. 37 and then 41 for this offense. Didn't look all that great in the first half against Maryland. Got off to a hot start against Purdue, and they didn't let back. They should have had another touchdown. Devin Brown, the backup. They let him try to run one in, and he ended up fumbling. I think he also had another rushing touchdown in that one. But they're finally clicking on offense, Nick, and that doesn't really include this ground game. They had 152, 2 scores. Very beat up in the backfield. Travion Henderson was warming up, didn't get to go. I think they were just holding him back for this game. He's obviously an explosive runner, physical back. Chip Trainum as well got hurt. Mike Williams been banged up this year. So their top 3 backs were out for last week's game. Dalton Hayden, the player they won a red shirt this year, ended up having to get the go. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with this backfield. I think they'll be more healthy for this one. I think they were just being on the cautious side before the biggest game of the year. But like you said, they need to be more efficient on the ground. The passing attack, though, Emeka Egbuka, he's going to be a question mark for this game. Cade Stover, though, has been phenomenal for McCord. 23 grabs, 359. He was great in South Bend. Marvin Harrison Jr., 600-plus yards, 5 touchdowns. A bit of a slow start to the year for him. Had 2 games held to under 35 yards, 100-plus the past 2 weeks. He's just been dominant. And if these games were closer, he probably would have even more numbers. He's finally getting to go, playing a tough secondary. What are your expectations for this passing attack? Again, Egbuka might not play. Julian Fleming's plenty capable. Carnell Tate, they were finally working in this past week. He had 3 grabs for 79 yards. So they have plenty of 5-star talents here. Egbuka, though, had a nice repertoire with him in that Notre Dame game, at least when it comes to converting third downs and working underneath. I think Kyle's really finding his stride in this offense, though, and that's bad news for this Penn State team.
Kyle McCord is hitting his stride and looking good so far this season. We were worried about whether he could take over the reins and be that quarterback that we thought he could be. He's having a pretty good season. 1,651 yards, 64% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception so far. Obviously, losing Emeka Egbuka is a huge loss. Having a pretty good season, like you said, found that groove against Notre Dame. 300 yards receiving and 3 scores for him. Marvin Harrison Jr., 600 yards receiving and 5 scores for him. But yet, that somehow is a letdown from him. You want to see a little bit more out of him. He's a very talented piece. Maybe he'll get a lot of targets this Saturday. Julian Fleming hasn't quite broken out yet, but he's got the opportunity. Carnell Tate, another guy that could get a lot of targets. Cade Stover, the big physical tight end. Obviously a target they're going to try to hit against this Penn State defense, which is a very good secondary. You look at Cade Stover. He's got 359, 3 scores. I'd like to see him get a lot of touches here on Saturday as well. I think Tate and Fleming are in for a big game potentially to be step up for this offense. It's a very good passing attack here for Ohio State, as we expected. 308 yards per game through the air. Overall total offense is 443 yards per game for this Ohio State team. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a big day. Fleming got to have a big day as well if Egbuka doesn't play.
Yeah, I mean, inconsistency on some third down. 2 of 12 in the opener against Indiana, 3 of 12 against Maryland, less than 25% in both of those games. But they were dominant, 58% against ND and then 61% this past week against Purdue. So if they can live, in third down situations that are favorable for their offense, they can certainly execute them. And that's going to be a big key for them, probably the biggest key for this offense. Looking at the Penn State defense, it's been a flawless year so far for the Nittany Lions. They're top 3 in every single category, it seems. They record sacks. They don't give up anything against the pass. Have 7 interceptions to 1 pick. Plenty of tackles for loss with 51. Again, though, the quality of opponents not good. Northwestern, Iowa, Massachusetts, Illinois, whose offense, sputtered in that game because Luke Altmaier was just not throwing good balls. And then West Virginia is probably the best offense they faced this year, Nick. I don't think that this defense is bad by any means. I think they're great. This is a phenomenal unit. But I do definitely think that some of these numbers are a little bit skewed. One that's not, though, is the amount of snaps these guys are playing. These are fresh bodies. Abdul Carter, 229 snaps is the most from any player on this team all season. That comes out to an average of 38 snaps per game. These guys are incredibly fresh, and that's a big number I'm going to point out all week long. And I think that's going to suit them very well going into a physical ball game.
This is certainly a good unit that is a bit skewed, like you said, the opponents they've played. You look at the rush yards allowed per game, 72.5 is a really impressive number, incredible number to be under 100. Pass yards is at 121.2, the best offense they played this year. Definitely is West Virginia's offense, who has a weird balance. Obviously Delaware, FCS opponent. Iowa does not have an offense. Northwestern, they don't have one either. UMass, not really producing anything on the ground or through the air. And then Illinois, like you said, Altmaier just had a tough day against the Nittany Lions. They're very fresh. These guys have good legs. They're going to have to be ready for this because this is not an offense that in Ohio State that can really hit you in so many different ways, even if they have Egbuka out for this game. I think this Penn State front seven is a very good unit that could be up for the task. And the secondary, though, they're the one big target here. Can Kyle McCord pick apart this secondary that hasn't really been tested so far this season?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal front seven led by Chop Robinson. Obviously, have other players as well. Isaiah Isaac, he leads the way with 7.5 TFL. Zane Durant's been good on the interior. Josiah Izzard, another player. Danny Dennis Sutton, former 5-star. They have plenty of different guys that have been rotating, throughout this defense. Kobe Kingsley starting to step up in that middle linebacker position. Curtis Jacobs is still their team leader. And Abdul Carter, he really hasn't been productive this year. And he did, again, I just said he did lead the team in snaps. So that's not great. He's not really producing. but I'm not really worried about it. Collectively as a unit, these guys are great, and that's better. They don't need to lean on their more, talented ball players to execute for them. Last year, obviously, they gave up 44 points to the Buckeyes. They're looking for some redemption here against a young quarterback who, again, is hitting his stride, but there's a lot of talent here to get off an offensive line that, at times has really been testy and hasn't been the greatest, and it seems like could be a bad matchup for the Buckeyes all around.
Good front seven that's been producing numbers, but some of these guys here, we want to see more numbers out of them. Curtis Jacobs leading the way with 23 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. Abdul Carter, like you said, leads the team in snap counts, but his tackles numbers not great. 14 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Need to see more of him. Chop Robinson, haven't seen him fully get broken out yet. 9 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks for him. Adiza Isaac, 12 total tackles, 7.5 for loss, and 5 sacks. So these are some good numbers, but I want to see more out of these guys. I think these guys are physical. They haven't really been tested so far this season. They don't have a great snap count either. So they haven't had a whole opportunity to really get out there and dominate. Kobe King's another guy, 16 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. I need to see more out of this front seven. They're going to be tested against this team. Can they make McCord uncomfortable, make him make mistakes? That's going to be a huge key success for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I mean, the safety position, we talk about how much talent they had there. Dominic DeLuca, he's a bit of a player that plays all over the place, not as much at safety, more so at linebacker in the slot. He's been a phenomenal run defender. Kevin Winston in the back end, he's also been an elite run defender. And they just have plenty of guys they can throw out there. Zakee Wheatley's having a good year. Jalen Reed, not as much. But they're loaded here. They've gotten plenty of different guys on the field. I think a lot of these guys are primed for this contest. At corner, it's going to be Caitlin King and Johnny Dixon looking to hold down Marvin Harrison Jr. I think King would be beneficial if they let him shadow the future high-end first-round selection. Not exactly sure what James Franklin and Manny Diaz will opt to do. And I think they have confidence, though, in anybody being able to hold these guys up. They're going to have to get good production from the slot as well. This is a secondary. They've been flawless this year. Again, the passing attacks they faced hasn't been all that great. Illinois is the best passing attack that they played, and Altmaier's really gifting them some interceptions there. Daquan Hardy in the slot, though, has a big task to do in this game. And he has to be a special teams asset as well, and he probably will be. 2 punt return for touchdowns against UMass. Regardless of who you're playing, it's hard to set up those returns and then have the returner be able to execute as well. So that's very impressive work from Daquan Hardy. Going to have to hear his name called a lot for them to win this ballgame.
Daquan Hardy's having a good season. Not as much in the tackle department, 5 total tackles, but 2 picks, 3 pass breakups, and like you said, total asset on special teams. Big numbers from Hardy so far at nickelback. I like him a whole lot. Kalen King, you're probably your best out-and-out defender in the secondary here in terms of pass coverage, 11 total tackles for him, but he needs to get better in getting the ball and deflecting passes. Only 1 pass breakup for him so far this season. Johnny Dixon at left cornerback, another talented piece who needs to be involved in this game. I think you can throw him around, move him around. He's got 2 pass breakups, 1 interception, 8 total tackles. This secondary is only allowing 121 yards per game through the air against poor opposition through the air. I think this is a big opportunity where they get tested. They're going to have nice matchups in the 101. I think they're going to go for 101 and pick the matchups they want. Very talented wide receiver core. They're going to have to play these guys well and get this coverage going early. I like this matchup. It's a very interesting matchup, but I think the secondary is in a good spot here.
Look at the Ohio State defense, this defensive line. They're the best part of their football team. They've been really good against the run, certainly against Maryland. They had a bit of struggles early on. Notre Dame, they really only had a good third quarter running the ball because they were on the field a lot in that game. A big touchdown by Travion Henderson was a one-play drive for them. They just got down with a long one. They instantly got the ball back. Sometimes that can hurt your football team, Nick, those explosive plays that lead to quick scores. And that's what happened in that scenario where they started to get grinded down on. They still held them to 0 points in that first half. This is a great run-stopping unit. Tyleik Williams, JT Tuimalau, Jack Sawyer starting to step up a little bit more. Michael Hollis, some great strength on the interior as well. Ty Williams, another player, is just phenomenal. This is a very good Ty Hamilton, that is. This is a phenomenal front for Ohio State, led by Tommy Eichenberg and Steele Chambers. Chambers, what is his 3rd year now at the linebacking position. His growth is certainly starting to showcase. Eichenberg certainly has been a little bit more inconsistent, not as good as probably was a season ago. He's still a high-end producer for them. He's going to be big in trying to slow down this running game that has some very impressive backs that can hurt you, but again, an interior offensive line that's really going to be tasked with some big, heavy products here from Ohio State.
Certainly going to be a test for the Penn State interior offensive line. Eichenberg, 46 total tackles, leading the team, but still, like you said, a bit disappointing from him. 2 tackles for loss and a sack. Steele Chambers, 36 tackles, not that far behind. 1 tackle for loss for him as well. So those 2 guys at linebacker obviously are very good veteran players who are producing so far this season. JT Tuimalau as well, 19 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Good numbers for him. Jack Sawyer, another guy that's producing in that jack position. A good thing that Jim Knowles kind of uses that jack position. Jack Sawyer, 17 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks for him. Good numbers early on this season. Ty Hamilton, another guy that's having a decent season as well, producing some nice tackle numbers. So overall, I think this is an incredible front seven that has a potential winning in the matchup battle against this Penn State offensive line. They could potentially win this battle in the trenches and force Penn State to throw the ball, which is something that could certainly make Drew Allaire very uncomfortable.
The Ohio State secondary, they've been pretty flawless themselves this year. They played some tougher passing attacks. Western Kentucky's no slouch. They certainly put up some good numbers. Notre Dame, Sam Hartman's a good quarterback. He can certainly expose you downfield. Maryland, they have weapons as well. And again, they haven't allowed a single passing play of 40-plus yards. Neither defense has. Purdue in the past, but they also have some weapons. So I think the entire body of work for the secondary are more impressive for the Buckeyes, just slightly based on their recent resume. And this is a big topic of discussion. Obviously, they got burned against Georgia, and they should have made some good plays, and they didn't. In the past, the secondary has really been criticized, and for good reason. Davis Enigbason, the transfer from Ole Miss, he's been good for them. Denzel Burke still sound out wide. Jordan Hancock, he's been a unsung hero so far, really stepping up. Jermaine Matthews, whenever he gets on the field, Lathan Ransom and Josh Proctor, 2 veteran safeties that are going to be counted on to not get beat over top. Penn State has not showcased the ability to hurt you downfield, so I expect maybe a lot of press, a lot of more physical, play at the line of scrimmage. I think they want to try and get some of these safeties, including Sonny Styles, who's been playing in the slot a good bit, on those tight ends that have been productive this season. I think this is a great matchup for the Buckeye secondary. Big prove-it opportunity, Nick, because at times they've just looked flat-out clueless, and this is, another year in this scheme here, so I think they're going to continue to grow and be better. Big-time opportunity here. If I'm concerned about one thing, it's Ohio State secondary and what's a favorable matchup at the same time.
Huge opportunities certainly for this. Josh Proctor, 25 total tackles, 1 interception, 3 pass breakups for him. Good numbers from Proctor early on. I like what I've seen out of him. Sonny Styles playing well, moving him around the slot, 22 total tackles for him. Pretty good in coverage so far this season. I think he's a good player to look at here. Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom as well. 2 guys that are having decent seasons. Ransom, 29 total tackles, 1 pass breakup for him. So I think I like the matchup in the slot. I think they're going to play, like you said, a little closer press coverage here, which is a good idea considering Penn State has struggled to beat teams over the top. This is a very good secondary that's been a bit more tested, more battle tested. Maryland's not a slouch through the air. Notre Dame, Western Kentucky, all pretty good teams. Talia Tagovailoa is not a bad quarterback. Hartman's a pretty good quarterback. Western Kentucky, obviously, air raid sort of system is always going to be tough to defend against. This is certainly an advantage for Ohio State on paper. They have a good advantage here against this Penn State offense that really just cannot seem to throw the deep ball at all.
Looking at the tail of the tape, team comparisons, I think quarterback's pretty even. We just saw McCord a couple weeks ago get his first real road test. Sam's going to be here for Aller. These guys are, the same when it comes to, career starts, running back room. Buckeyes are pretty deep, but at the same time, the running game really hasn't been all that stellar. Henderson, that big run against Notre Dame, though, is notable. Penn State, they'll give them the edge with those sensational sophomores. Wide receiver, Buckeyes clear edge in that category. Offensive line, this could be another even category, but I think at left tackle, Fashanu, I'm going to give them a slight edge. Even though I'm actually trending more towards even on that category. I think defensive line and linebacker, though, I can't really make an argument for why one team would be better in that specific area. Maybe a little bit more depth for the Nittany Lions, but I think better players overall for the Buckeyes. Linebacker, same thing goes there. Secondary, I'll go ahead and give the Nittany Lions the edge because I definitely think the players are better there. Clear cut with more depth and some more talent. This is as even as it gets, though, in the Big Ten, Nick. These are very good rosters, very good football teams top to bottom.
Very even teams top to bottom here, very talented teams. I think this is a very good tail of the tape. I think McCord could potentially get the nod over Drew Allaire so far just because McCord's played in tougher environments on the road, but they're both very young signal callers who are learning the game overall. You might want to give the defensive line to Ohio State as well, just based off the pure production, in my opinion. But overall, this is a very balanced. These teams are very balanced. Tough environment in Columbus that Penn State are heading into, though. Interesting tail of the tape matchup.
Final thoughts on the prediction, keys to the game for Penn State. Aller must step up in the moment. The secondary must prove it's worth the praise. McCord, it wasn't easy by any means in South Bend, but he stepped up in the brightest spots for that team. Short yardage has to be better for Ohio State, either be tougher or more creative. We already talked about that. Stonewall this line's run game. I think they'll have a good shot. I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to limit this run game 27-17 for Ohio State. Penn State, I think, is a great team, so I don't really want to put a full-fledged blowout. I just think the matchup is just so much greater for them, just based on what Penn State's shown us so far through the air. Plenty of opportunities to get in sync, and they've not really been conservative by any means. They've been throwing the football a good bit. You think they'd be able to air it out a little bit more. I think it's a legitimate concern, and that's, pretty evident with who they've played so far. So I'm going to go 27-17. I think it'll probably end up being a closer game in the end. But I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State runs away with this one being at home and that matchup right there. I think Aller is great. But he's just a young quarterback here, and the weapons so far, they've not really been stepping up. So I think this could be a disaster for Penn State. But if James Franklin gets it done, this is a great football team, one of the best in the country.
If they can win this game, they certainly put themselves in the driver's seat for the college football playoff. A tough matchup, though. I'm going to take Ohio State. I'm going to take them with the points as well. It was 4.5. I looked at my book before we got on the air. 28-22 is what I went with. I think it's tough for Penn State here. I like this Penn State team a lot. I'm very excited for this team. I just think this is a tough matchup on the road. It's going to be very loud there in Columbus. They're going to want to win this game. This is a huge opportunity. Ryan Day, him beating Notre Dame cooled his seat a little bit. He's still in the hot seat, in my opinion. He's got to produce soon in the Big Ten. This is a big opportunity for him to produce and get the job done against a very good Penn State team under James Franklin. This is an exciting matchup with two teams that have playoff aspirations. Whoever wins this one really does put themselves in the driver's seat heading into the rest of Big Ten play. Tough matchup overall here, but I like Ohio State to get the job done.
Michigan does play both of these over the final few weeks of the season. That's me for today's episode, Nick. I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this massive matchup.
Yep, we've been waiting for this one all year. It's going to be here in a couple of days. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe.